I'm going to show you how to play Ranger in Path of Exile, and briefly go over how to build Ranger, and also the skill tree for the Ranger, as well as anything else I feel is useful to know as a Ranger. Starting out as a Ranger, I would highly recommend using a Lightning Arrow build. So the two main skills we're going to be focusing on are Lightning Rod and Stormcaller Arrow. Lightning Rod does AoE damage when it lands, and it will also do the same AoE damage whenever it gets chained to by your Stormcaller Arrow. This is really useful for dealing with big groups of enemies, so you can use your Lightning Rod and then chain to it. So the idea here is that you want to be kiting the enemies, and if you have enemies that are about the same speed as you, you can basically place your Lightning Rod right where you are, and then turn around and shoot your Lightning Arrow at the Lightning Rod. You're pretty much just going to keep repeating that until you beat the groups of enemies. If you need a bit more survivability, you can also combine this with the Escape Shot skill. And Escape Shot's right next to Lightning Arrow on the skill tree. So if you want to escape pressure from enemies, you can use Escape Arrow. And you kind of just want to combine all of these skills. I would recommend mainly sticking to your Lightning Rod and your Lightning Arrow though for DPS, and then use your Escape Arrow when you really need it. You can also use your Escape Arrow to keep higher health enemies in one spot, and then you can use your Lightning Rod and chain to that Lightning Rod. For single targets, once you're around level 4 skill gem for Lightning Arrow, you're going to do about the same damage with your basic attacks as well as your Lightning Arrow. The further you get on your skill gems, the more useful Lightning Arrow will be for single target DPS. But in the beginning, just focusing basic attacks on single targets will probably be around the highest DPS you can do. You can use skills like Snipe Shot, but really, unless you have an enemy frozen or heavily slowed, it's going to be hard to charge it all the way up without getting severely punished for it. Snipe Shot can do really good damage if you time it correctly. But in the beginning, without a crit build, you're really reliant on charging it up to the moment that it's actually going to guarantee a critical hit. And if you don't do that, you're going to do less damage than just basic attacks or electric arrow, so it's not very practical. If a single target's staying around the same spot, you can use Lightning Rod and then your electric arrow on top of it. And that does a little more than basic attack once you're around level 4. It's going to keep growing as you level your skill gems though. I do want to briefly explain the damage from Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod. So Lightning Arrow can be confusing because it says converts 40% of physical damage to lightning damage. That doesn't mean that it does 40% of the physical damage. It means that 40% that would be physical gets changed to lightning damage. So if you have a lot of physical damage, you're going to be doing more lightning damage and inflicting shock more often. Wouldn't worry much about having physical damage specifically in the early game, and that's because the overall damage of Lightning Arrow is from attack damage. So for example, with this quiver, it can do 3 to 5 and 4 to 6 fire damage. So if I high roll and get 11 damage, that 11 is going to be multiplied by this attack damage percent here on Lightning Arrow. But since it's not physical damage, it is not going to have any of the damage portion converted to lightning damage. And Lightning Rod works the exact same way. Also, if you want to pan onto a skill and see all of the different underlined words, hold Alt and then mouse over them. Then if you do want to go the poison route, then Poison Burst Arrow and Vine Arrow work pretty similarly to Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod, where you're going to use your Vine Arrow and then poison it to make it do more damage. Finally, a lot of your passive skills are going to work well with the crossbow as well. Personally, I found the crossbow skills to be inferior all around to the Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod, but feel free to try out the crossbow, although you will need extra skill gems, and you'll have to take out your bow and arrow skill gems in order to use the crossbow. For your support gem on your basic bow shot, Lightning Infusion is going to be your top pick, so long as you don't use something like a fire quiver, or you're not using a bow that does a lot of elemental damages, a lot of different ones. As long as you're doing purely physical and electric damage, this is going to be your top pick. Envenom's a good option for dealing with a lot of the mage type enemies, so you can bypass their shields often. And then Pin is good for keeping enemies in place, but keep in mind if you use Pin, then it's not actually going to stop enemies from attacking like Stun does. On Lightning Arrow, Pierce is purely beneficial, so it's definitely one that you want. Then Scattershot and Chain are both just going to make it better at dealing with large crowds of enemies, but you'll do less AoE damage with them. On Lightning Rod, if you have Scattershot, you're going to be having a pretty big area that's covered by Lightning Rod, but it's not going to do very much damage. I would recommend going for Magnified Effect, because 40% AoE on Lightning Rod is really useful. And Acceleration's okay, but I wouldn't prefer it. And Acceleration's okay, it doesn't make too big of a difference. On your Escape Shot, all of your support skills are really good. You shouldn't really be using Escape Shot often, so I would recommend using Expanse on it. An Expanse with Frost Nexus can greatly support you getting away from enemies, and also slow them so you can chain lightning them more easily. And Deep Freeze is also solid, just to have more freeze duration. Those are all the skills I really want to focus on starting out as a ranger. So let's move on to gear. What you're looking for in gear is mainly just additional damage and things that add to attack damage. And that's because your Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod are going to benefit greatly from that. Aside from that, projectile damage. Aside from that, movement speed, projectile damage, and whatever attributes you need just to equip things are what I would focus on. Since dexterity goes with evasiveness gear, you will be really squishy when you do get hit, so it could be smart to have some strength, because strength gear will give you armor and strength will also give you a little health. But I would focus damage above all else. Then finally, let's get into our passive skill tree. When you're going for damage, you're going to start with this projectile damage, and I would recommend just grabbing all of these projectile damage nodes, get Honed Instincts, and then continue down this path, get Clean Shot. Then once you have this projectile damage, you'll have a couple of options. You can go from Honed Instincts and grab Ailment Chance and Vile Wounds. Vile Wounds is going to do a lot more damage when you have an enemy shocked, or if you freeze them, ignite them, but you're mainly going to be shocking. Poison does not count as an elemental ailment, by the way. Another option you can have is after you get the last projectile damage, you can go down here to here, and then here, and build up this quiver effect tree. If you get up to here, your quiver is going to be adding a lot to your damage, so I'd say this is a really good option. If you go this route, you're kind of cutting out your capabilities with a crossbow and preferring a bow though. Then once you've grabbed that, you can go from here to here and go all the way down this part of the skill tree. And from here, there are a lot more projectile damages, and you can grab both of these big nodes. And this one especially is going to significantly increase your damage. So this heavy ammunition is definitely something you want to go for. Then once you've gotten that, you can branch over to here and go to what I believe is the Mercenaries tree. And then grab this Remorseless, grab these projectile damages, and get Ricochet. Then a final option would be, after you get this big quiver node, you can go back down, and then you can follow this attribute path, and then branch over and get Death from Afar. That's really what I would say are the best options. And I would say those are some good options for doing damage, and that should give you some guidance for where to go on your skill tree, and that should help you a lot starting as Ranger. That's it.